Bam! MC is in the house. What's up, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. The Warrior Stream is my weekly live stream. I'm here every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, taking a topic deep dive and having a good time while doing it. And this week, I decided to sort of open up the format. Before we get into that, I always got to remember to take care of business first. If you guys are not getting my email, you can go to masterchimletter.com and sign up for that. If you can look at the description on the couple of Facebook pages that I'm streaming on right now, the YouTube page that I'm streaming on, all the relevant links to what's going on is in the description. A lot of goings on as of late in society and American society specifically. And just so many different topics I wanted to cover. I decided, you know what, let me just open it up a bit and make it a little bit more conversational, I would say, right? Who do we got here? My man, Jesse, what's going on, brother man? Good to see you. Big Phil, what's up, brother man? Jamie, my operative up in Canada. Good to see you, brother man. So today's, talk, I have a bunch of questions that were either gotten through my coaching or messages that people had sent me. I've composited some of the questions in some cases because I didn't want to just limit it to the parameters of one specific question. Just wanted to have a reason to talk about the topic. But I want you guys to sort of also either participate in these questions that I'm going to be addressing and any questions that you may have aside from what I'm talking about. Aaron, what's up, Aaron? Aaron writes, "Hey, NC, I think I know the answer to the question I'm about to ask, but that's okay. Did you ever check out the song I commented in the last couple of weeks? I have no more fucks to give. I keep seeing it people." So basically, it's always in my head. Do away at some point. I have no recollection of that whatsoever. So either I didn't see it or my brain deleted it. In any case, feel free to drop a link or what have you, and I'll check it out. But I did not. I did not. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is the Charlie Kirk situation. Right. So there's so many different aspects to what's going on now, and this is going to become, it seems like, one of these things that for the next 50 years people are going to be talking about this and what really happened and what was never known that should have been released, and like this JFK-esque conspiracy conversation is going to be an ongoing thing to some extent. In which case, I'll start off by saying, and I've commented on this a couple times already. I don't want to keep, rehashing this, but what was going on with Charlie Kirk has nothing to do with what was going on with you the day before, what's going to be going on with you the day after. I do think that, there is such a thing, and I was misunderstood in one of my earlier comments that was somebody had given me some feedback that it let me know I was misunderstood, whereby I was saying that if somebody was, because I have the whole thing about outrage, and I think outrage is a waste of time. I think it's an emotional, cathartically driven ritual. It doesn't do anything, but it could feel so traumatic, or at least impactful to the individual when they are executing a outrage filled rant and what have you. It could feel so significant that they'll actually convince themselves they've done something at the end of it, and they haven't, and which is why I'm against outrage. If people need a cathartic, some sort of a cathartic ritual, or just the dissipation of anxiety and stress, by all means, you have to do that. Refer to my bucket model video that I made 10 years ago at this point. But you also have to acknowledge that every single time you go to that well, it's like it incentivizes that you're going to go there again under the same circumstances later on. And I will say the problem with, becoming traumatized is, you're at equilibrium, you get knocked down. Sometimes people, in order to sort of bridge this gap and return to equilibrium, they have different methods of doing that, different rituals. And for some men, it's outrage. They exclaim this outrage, and it's really little more than sort of aggressive virtue signaling. But all it does at the end of it is it brings you back to where you were beforehand. So it's not like it's something that you should be doing. I wouldn't advise it. So what's the difference then when somebody sees something like the Charlie Kirk shooting and suddenly acts differently, right? So somebody had asked me, well, are you saying that, paraphrasing, are you saying that you should have already been doing everything that people are doing now that they've seen Charlie Kirk, having been assassinated? Are you saying that everybody should have already been doing these things? Well, yes and no. Yes, in terms of anything that you could have been doing prior to that, right? There is a significant portion of this where that happening is just the sort of revelation of the state of the world right now, right? Or at least the state of America. It's not something that is so out of possibility that we're sort of taken aback and we have to sort of revisit what is reality. It's like, no, this is, it really just shared where we're at. But there's also, so I am saying that there are some things that, yeah, you should have been doing. You should, I'm the guy, fucking tribe matters. Strength always wins. You have to have a relationship with violence. Like all these different things I've been talking about for years. Certainly not the only one that's been talking about it. So yeah, any of these things that you should have been doing, that might be the impetus for you doing it. And you know what? Better late than never. Welcome to the party, pal, etc. But there's also a bunch of people that I think rightfully are going to do things now that they weren't doing prior to the Charlie Kirk shooting that I do approve of in these contexts. And let me specify what I mean by that. There's something called Parkinson's law. And Parkinson's law states that a task will expand or shrink to accommodate the time allotted for it. So we all know, being in school back in the day, you had a paper that was due in a week. We didn't do anything for 6 days, 23 hours. And then right at the last second, we're cramming to get it done and we wind up doing it. In other words, it took us the entire week to do something that in actual time should have only taken us about an hour or so. That's just a rudimentary example of what Parkinson's law is. Well, there are going to be people that say, okay, we understand that there are different stages and phases of society in the direction that it's going, right? I have something called the Dominion cycle that I shared an image of it on my Instagram this morning, but it's going to be a power program for the Mastermind group. But the stages that are in it, it's like it's good to know when we move from one stage to the next stage. And this might be the event that signifies we're at the next stage. If there is any preparation that needs to be done by the individual in the now current stage we're in, or the stages that are going to follow this stage, then Charlie Kirk, his assassination sort of lets people know, okay, we're running out of time. You better start getting your shit straight because we're running out of time. So in other words, it's not like they were fundamentally opposed to doing any of the things by way of preparation or readiness that they're now doing. It's that they didn't prioritize it to the point where it was already done. And because they've seen Charlie Kirk get assassinated, they now realize that they need to make it more of a priority. And I would say it's more of an observation of Parkinson's law at work than somebody fundamentally changing their philosophy. Now, what I'm saying is there are both. There are some people that this fundamentally change their philosophy. There are other people where it's like, okay, let me hurry up and do what I got to do. But then there's that third group, that I consider myself to be a part of, where we just always knew that this was how it works, right? There is a cyclical nature to how large societies function, how empires fall, right? The life cycle of an empire, we could say. And the commonalities are tribe, are a relationship with violence, are everything that I talk about in the three roads, manifesto that I wrote. Um, so a lot of these things are consistent. So when we look at Charlie Kirk getting shot, like as tragic as that is, as much as like, and I don't want to keep beating a dead horse. Is that in poor taste, that metaphor? But the idea of it is, I don't want to keep rehashing the same points. But I had a tremendous respect for what Charlie Kirk did. I even respect how he exposed himself to stand up for what he believed in. The other side of that, of course, is, and I'm not making this argument against, but the other side of it is there was a consequence, a cost, aside from his life. He has a wife, he has 2 young children. He has a message that now lost a very strong voice. There's a reason why I would say he had a security detail. He had a bulletproof vest. So he wanted to be secure and he didn't want to get shot. I understand there's a point at which there's going to be risk if you're going to put yourself in an open, area like that. And as controversial a figure as he is, but he still did have the bulletproof vest and the security team. So he was interested in doing that. I'm of the mindset, and again, this is me, if I'm going to want to not get shot, I'm going to make sure to the best of my ability that I'm not getting shot. Meaning there's a spectrum, like what's the extreme in total security? You're just speaking, in a closed set, some production studio somewhere where security is a lot more controllable. The opposite end of that is just walking and giving a talk, I guess in a public area, whatever. But I would say where he wound up getting shot was much more on the lax side than the controlled side. But again, everybody has their preferences. Everything, as Thomas Sowell would say, everything in life is a trade-off. He was able to embed himself in a lot of, very genuine, authentic interactions with college students because he put himself out there. The cost of that, obviously, prior to him getting shot, was the risk of something happening. And then ultimately he wound up paying that cost with his life. I think that an individual who observes that, who supported, never mind just supporting Charlie Kirk's message, because again, overlap and offset with me and his stuff, with most of you guys and his stuff. But if you're an individual who was shocked that could happen, then wherever your politics are, like almost put that on the shelf for a second. It's like you got to build a relationship with fucking reality first. This is the way it happens. I use the phrase a lot, the line from Princess Bride. We're both men of action, right? This idea of we sort of know the way the world works, right? And when Charlie Kirk gets shot, it's tragic. It's unfortunate. It's a lot of things. But out of the realm of possibility, no, there are people who hate him. When you look at all the people who are celebrating, right, the fact that he got shot, it's like those people were there before he got shot. Like, we understand that's what that is. So we understand that, and again, this is a big driver. It's why I started talking about outrage a couple of days ago. It's because of this particular thing. A bunch of grown men becoming completely emotional because blue-haired, overweight lesbians at college campuses were celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. It's like, yeah, well, this is who they are. Like, did you not know that before this? Did you assume that that they were either that they had a little bit more humanity than they do, or did you assume that you're entitled to some sort of behavior on their part? That's not the way it works. These people, I would have told you beforehand, absolutely. Anybody on the right that they've, just labeled, the evil, the Hitler, the Nazi, the devil, I don't know, whatever the fuck label they put. If any of those individuals that label were to be murdered like that, they would celebrate. Just expect that moving forward. Like, that's how that goes. And all of the outrage, it's like I could easily just say, yeah, you should go do something. Not that I'm inciting violence on the internet. I'm not saying that. I'm saying to counter their point. Somebody who is acting it's like, do something. Well, what am I supposed to? It's like, right, so shut the fuck up. Like, What are we even talking about? Yeah, sure, acknowledge it. Like, yeah, okay, see that person, see that person. I'm not even opposed to the guys that are getting recordings of all those people and calling their employers and stuff. It's like, yeah, I support that 100%. Have these guys experience a little bit of consequence. It manages those pets of society a little bit more effectively. But the outrage, it's like, listen, I mean, because doing something could be, like, yeah, if you're that emotional about it, get recordings of these people doing that, find their employers, send them to their employers, get them fired. Like, do that if you need to do something, but just don't act so outraged and emotional all the time, right? Um, so I don't know. I don't want to keep, getting after it over and over again. But the idea of it is we're really I don't think ever going to know fully, what was behind his shooting. Um, I think what is it, the cui bono, like who benefits from this? And sure, there are a bunch of people that benefit. There are a bunch of people that suffer. We could expect that the people who are going to suffer from him being assassinated are probably not the ones behind it. And we could say the people who are benefiting are the larger set from which the person who is responsible is a member. Um, who's that going to be? How's it going to? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. All I know is, with every new update that the FBI is giving, it sort of raises the eyebrow a little bit more. Um, Me and a small group of my friends at the beginning when we first heard it, um, I have one of my exact quotes is, and this was maybe an hour after the event, I said it's going to be a crazy lefty or a tranny. And so far, like, now, mind you, not that I was fucking some Nostradamus. I mean, because that's kind of who does these things, right? And it looks like the narrative that they're unpacking is congruent with that. But I'm also willing to say that, there are always the people behind the people, and all of them share responsibility. How that winds up, manifesting in terms of the information we get, like, we'll see, because we don't have access to all the things we would like to, and that's, I think, something that a lot of people don't have a functional relationship with, just how little influence you have over national, let alone international, like geopolitical dynamics and relationships. And, like, no, you could become as strong as you are. You could develop a strong community. You could put pressure on local representatives to, do what you want. But you got to understand there is a limitation to the way that this works. And it's not to say, I'm not one of those guys that says don't vote or ignore everything. I'm not one of those guys. But I am one of those guys that says it's your vote is so insignificant, but it also costs very little, So it's like it doesn't do much, but it doesn't cost much. So if everybody was not allowed to vote, it'd be a completely different country. So let's keep the fact that we're allowed to vote going. Let's keep participating in that and not allow ourselves to just throw that by the wayside, uh, almost acting like it's not a significant component to what our freedoms are that we enjoy. Still comes down to what are you going to do, right? What are you about? Right. So Al Jitsu in the house. What's up, brother, man? Good to see you. Patrick, what's up, brother? Good to see you. Jamie writes, they don't call people a Nazi because they want others to sit down and have polite conversations with them. That's right. That's right. Um, on that Dominion cycle that I shared on my Instagram story this morning, you'll see in a couple of different stages, it goes from negotiation to violence. And, there's some detail, some nuance in those transitions, but it's also, accurate to just say when people refuse to talk, they start being violent. Like, historically, that's what happens, and then after the violence, it's either somebody's completely annihilated or they go back to talking. But like that's the cycle, like the way it works. In other words, it's like it always helps to talk first, unless you just want to annihilate somebody, right? And then it doesn't matter because you're not trying to build a bridge to some form of mutualistic alliance down the road. Like, you just don't care, Frank the Killer, what's up, Frank? Good to see you, brother, man. Hope all's well. Right. So let's get into now violence, right? So what separates a man who's just dangerous because he's reckless from a man who knows how to use violence the right way to protect his family? Well, a couple things, right, with violence. Number one, your emotional state, right? Or how much emotion plays in you being violent. One of the things that I've done over the last 20 years from time to time in my academy when training is play music that either the students absolutely abhor, play music that has absolutely no connection to the type of soundtrack you would think fighting training, is requiring. Um, and a lot of times the feedback that I get is, can we put on some heavy metal or Wu Tang or something, hard hitting? And my whole thing is like, listen, why is it? And this is the line I would have. Why is it you guys got to be angry to practice violence? You shouldn't have to be angry. We do violence because it's our job. We don't do violence because it helps us feel better about our frustrations. And sometimes, even with something as seemingly trivial as the music that you're training to, could build associations that encourage more of an emotional state. I'm not saying this is for everybody at all times, but it is certainly something that could be a liability for beginners. This idea of getting fired up to spar, getting fired up to grapple. Like, why do you need to wake up or become, emotionally invested, in order to do this effectively? And obviously, the more emotional you are, the less intellectualized the process is going to be. The less you're going to be able to recall, the less you're going to be able to, to progress toward mastery. So, just being emotional in and of itself is a liability in most cases, right? Jitsu writes, Andrew Tate asks a good question. What do we do with these people? Obviously, we can't reason with them. And you know what? I would say that the pets of society, right? So, what do I mean by that? I have a pet. I don't know if you guys have pets. And my pets, what they do is they entertain us. They got a little bit of a responsibility. My dog barks when, the male guy's here, etc. But for the most part, we feed them and they exist. And the utility of them existing or our owning them, varies depending on the pet. I got chickens that give me eggs, another example. But if we stop feeding them, they die because they don't have the ability to take care of themselves. They don't have that level of independence, self-reliance, etc. They are disconnected from their natural states. Well, similarly, society has pets. Society has pets who have designed an identity that engineers access to the surplus of a society, the surplus that was created through the efforts and creativity of producers of the society. And they basically act as if society is supposed to take care of them. The same way my dog looks at me and asks, what's up with the fucking food? The pets of society have been disconnected from the fundamental accountability of providing for themselves, of looking after their own. That is like an existential level, fundamental aspect of an individual. And that's been compromised in them. If that most fundamental instinct has been neutered in those individuals, just how enthusiastic are you expecting these people to be to have a honest, good faith conversation with people who don't agree with how they think the world's supposed to run? They won't even take care of themselves. But you think they're supposed to have an aggressive debate with somebody in good faith and not opt for violence? Like, have you guys ever seen those videos of like the moms that have like 6 kids with 6 baby daddies and they're complaining that they don't get enough money from the government and that um, something's owed them for no other reason than they don't have and other people do. And somehow in their dysfunctional relationship reality, they think that it is moral, ethical, that they have access to the fruit of other people's labor. Well, those types of individuals, just how invested in a functional society do you think they are? And that's one of the ironies. It's like these people are destructive. They're sabotaging. They're leeches, right? They're parasites. And all they do is think about themselves. I think people who are capable, who are the opposite, the antithesis of that type of archetype of citizen, needs to be just as selfish. Because those people who are powerful, who are tribal, who are ethical, who are self-reliant and driven, creative, responsible, accountable, all these different things, when they're selfish, society gets better. When the other people are selfish, society gets worse. So we need to be just as selfish because society will improve. That's the way it works. The problem is, and again, it's in that Dominion cycle image that I put on my Instagram story today. At some point, everybody, decentralizes into more functional scale tribes. And then eventually the surplus gets created again. And then they have the fucking dumb idea, okay, let's everybody be one again. And it just goes on and on and on. Without accountability and consequence, there's not going to be any change, right? Charlie Kirk got shot. That was a consequence for his actions. It's like, yeah, but it wasn't justified. Like, well, here's where some of you guys need to wake up. Justified by whom? I guarantee you the person who shot him thought he was supposed to be shot. The country that hired the person that shot him, I'm fucking around. But the idea of it is, if you keep clinging to this expectation of somebody sort of plugging into the same universal morality that you think everybody's supposed to be aware of, you're going to get eaten up like somebody's fucking lunch. That's the way it works. They say an armed society is a polite society. Well, why do you think that is? It's because everybody's walking around with a magazine full of consequences. And people tend to be a little bit more accountable with how they conduct themselves. I remember one time, a couple of kids in my neighborhood were getting robbed by these kids that were younger than the kids that I knew. The kids that I knew were friends of my younger brother. And I happened to be walking like through the neighborhood. I came upon this sight of these little kids basically robbing a little motorcycle from one of my brother's friends. My brother was there also. I didn't know what the fuck was going on. So I'm like, what did everybody turn into a bitch all of a sudden? So I went and I got in these kids' face. And I'm like, who the fuck are you? Like, I start telling, get the fuck out of here, all this stuff. At which point, one of the kids fucking pulls out a revolver and lays it on my chest. It was so heavy, he couldn't even hold it. So he's laying it on my chest. Now, I was untrained. To me, this is like fucking lasers and lightsabers. Like, if I even touch this thing, my head's going to get blown off. I didn't know what was what. Which, in hindsight, was probably, fortunate, because who knows what I would have done had I been able to disarm the kid. But when he laid that on my chest, the one thing I'll notice is that my tone changed, right? I went from you motherfucker to, oh, what's everyone getting excited about? Like, calm down. We can talk about this. Because here he was. Let me lay these consequences on your chest right now. And let's revisit your fucking approach. And I sure as shit did. I sure as shit did. And that's the thing. When people are self-reliant, they tend to hold themselves more accountable. Like, let's say you own a store, the pizza shop. I know my hypothetical was a pizza shop. You own a pizza shop and somebody comes in and they take a bunch of your napkins. They're not buying pizza. They just come in, they see the napkins, they take a bunch of, you're going to go like, oh, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what the fuck are you taking napkins for? Like, that's for customers only or whatever. Or you're going to at least get them to acknowledge that, hey, I'm going to give you those napkins, but don't fucking come in here looking for napkins. There will be some ownership over it. But if you were just at work and let's say you hate your boss, let's say, you're of the employee mindset, every day you show up for work just to not get fired. Somebody walks in and takes napkins. You're not saying a fucking thing. Why? What's the point? It's not worth it. What am I going to argue with this guy over this? And that's the difference between somebody who is self-reliant and takes ownership and accountability over what it is that they're doing and people that just walk around entitled. They don't carry consequences with them. They throw out their consequences and they add more entitlements and they walk around with that. Right? And that is the interaction that you get. That is what you expect from people who are pets of society. They're just waiting for somebody to feed them. And true to form, if you have a pet and you're not feeding the pet and they're complaining that they're hungry, you are at fault because you're the one with the pet. So that's the other angle of this that isn't addressed very frequently. It's like we created that mindset. We created that entitlement. So we need to undo it. We can't act as if this is just purely, some anecdotal instance of somebody deciding to be a loser and have a bunch of kids from a bunch of different men. It's like there's also these drivers, these larger scale incentives that this is just, a manifestation of. So we need to address it at every scale. Right? We need to change the systems, but we also need to tell that fat loser to get a fucking job, to do something like the whole workfare thing. Like I haven't studied the actual policies, but it's like, yeah, on the face, it's like, why would we give anybody anything if they didn't do anything for it? What else going on? Jamie writes, the pagan Germanic adage is a thrall takes revenge at once, a coward never. And the Italians, vengeance is a dish best served cold. Well, it's funny because I think, if you've ever read The Prince, Machiavelli's The Prince, he had written it and was giving it to the very people that exiled him. And the idea is, some people will look at, what to be Machiavellian is, right? His name became an adjective. To be Machiavellian is to be, cold-hearted or sociopathic, or there's all these negative things that are going on. And I would argue there is a level of scale to which any compassion that somebody demonstrates is either dysfunctional or fraudulent, because it is not physically possible to maintain these social connections with, Dunbar says it's 150 people. Let's say it's 200. Let's get crazy and say you're really full of love. 200 people. Beyond that, it is a representative protocol that you have with these people. I conduct myself a certain way. It's like, oh, I feel bad, for these starving children in Africa, right? I always talk about the starving kid with the flies going around his head. You're talking to the kid and he's got a fly on his eyeball. The flies are like rubbing his hands together in the kid's eyeball. I just want you to see the image, guys. And you have some people that will see that and cry. And you're like, well, go to Africa and bring them a fucking sandwich. Like, what are you doing here? Oh, I feel so bad. Like, to me, it's, and I don't want to make this too personal, but I get so disgusted with that, because you would sit here and demonstrate this emotional cost that you are experiencing, yet you won't do anything to resolve the issue that's making you that way. So to me, you're either dysfunctional or you're full of shit. And most of the time, people are just full of shit. You do get these people, the whole bleeding heart, like, oh, he's a bleeding heart. Well, hearts that bleed, like, people die, right? Or he wears his heart on his sleeve. That's not where hearts go, right? So in those sayings is the revelation that these people are not functional, right? So if I hear some kid across the world gets murdered, I would never wish that on a kid. But to become dysfunctional because of it without doing something about it is a fast track to becoming controlled and manipulated by people who are in control of the narrative. I have 4 children. If something were to happen to my 4 children, I have plans, but I can't say I've been there. I have plans, but I can't say that I've been there and know that I'd be of sound mind to be able to implement them. But the people that think there should not even be a separation in how we treat people that are close to us and strangers that are completely disconnected from us. No tribe in history has been able to sustain itself with that type of approach. So yeah, listen, do you like you can pursue your preference however you want. Just know that nowhere in history has that been allowed to exist and that people survived. And by say allowed, I mean by reality, right? So this idea of compassion, you guys really got to take another look at that. I like empathy. I like the emotional association we have with people in our tribe. I like when one of my brothers is suffering, like I have to go and do something lest I begin to suffer also. I think there is a sort of a self-regulation in a group where that's concerned. But outside of the group, oh no, now you're fucking up. Now you are fucking up. And I remember my buddy Tuan Tom said he was in front of passing through like an abortion clinic. Not that he was going to, he was bad, and he saw this protest, and he goes up to one of the ladies that's outside. They're murdering babies in here. It was a sign, something like that, and he goes, "Who's murdering babies?" And she goes, "The people inside. They're killing babies." It's like that, and he said to her, "And you're out here holding a fucking sign?" That's so good. So good. It's like they're murdering babies in there, and you're out here with a fucking sign? Like, go and do, like, what do you do? It just doesn't match, right? It just doesn't match. Because that's how ridiculous it is. Oh, I'm so upset. Oh, well, how upset are you? Like, upset enough to do something? No, then you shouldn't be that upset. Acknowledge it. Make whatever adjustments you need to make, by all means. But unless you're going to go do something, there should be a limit, and it should be a pretty low limit to just how traumatized you are observing something that has happened I don't know how many times. By the way, not to minimize the significance of Charlie Kirk being shot, but a lot of motherfuckers get shot, right? Years ago, there was a kid there was in New York who got stabbed outside of a bodega, and there was a video. And all of America was like beside itself because there's this, innocent, good-looking young kid got stabbed by a bunch of fucking animals, and it was Justice for Junior, maybe. Justice for Junior was like the tagline of like the whole story and everything. And I remember back then when I had the podcast, The Pressure Project, saying, everybody that gets stabbed, it looks like that. But the fact that they saw it made it something different to them. And again, it's either it entered into their bubble, their little fraudulent relationship they have with reality. This sort of pierced that bubble because they got to see it. Or it becomes a contest of who could virtue signal the hardest. But to me, it's like, everybody that gets stabbed, it looked like that. When people get shot, it looks like that. So anything that you were going to do prior to that, again, it's the argument, well, why hasn't it been done? Unless this signifies the next phase of a process, and now that you're on the clock for whatever you're supposed to do now, all right, there's an argument for that. Spoke about that in the beginning. But these people losing their mind disproportionately, I would say, to occurrences that it's like if I showed you videos of all the people that got shot today, you'd be in a fucking mental institution if you reacted this way to all of them. So there's always that requirement I think we have, especially you men out there. Like, we're not allowed to become dysfunctional because we observe reality, especially not when it's somebody who's not in our tribe. We could be moved, motivated, incentivized to pivot, change our approach, enter the next stage, like I referred to, like make the adjustments as you want, but to lose your shit over it, it's like, I don't understand how you even expect to function like that. Charlie Kirk gets assassinated, and you have people who are just dysfunctionally emotional in mourning of it. Listen, do what you want. But what happens if your husband, your wife, your son, your daughter, your brother, your sister, your mother, what happens if something happens to them? Is your reaction then escalated? Or is it anybody dies that you're aware of, you become this emotional mess? And again, my argument is just, let's pursue the one that's most functional. Let's pursue the approach that makes us the strongest. Remember, the losers fucked up society because all they did was become parasites, selfish parasites. I think the people on the opposite end of capability and responsibility need to become just as selfish. I'm not saying that fixes society, but it certainly fixes the individual and his tribe. And good societies are made of good individuals and good tribes. So again, my argument is one of priority, right? Hamowitz says, Morgan and Morgan here with this morning's message. The state of Israel did not kill Charlie Kirk. Thank you. Okay. I don't know if I was supposed to get something there, but all right. Message shared. 12-pack. Great to be here, MC, and chat. Right on, 12-pack. What's going on? Phil says, I can only imagine the look on her face. She had to be so confused. I'm assuming you meant when Two on Tom said that to the girl. Oh, man. I would have given anything to be there for that. I thrive on those moments. I had the opportunity to talk at a LOT training that Two on Tom was hosting this past weekend. And he had a good group of guys, 20, 30 guys. And LOT is the psych approach to sort of mindset training and the way that we can sort of leverage our cognitive abilities to become just more effective where our mental approach is concerned. LOT, logical order of thinking. And he had asked if I came and gave a talk, and I did. And, Two on Tom and I, we always just vibe together. And the two of us there talking, it's like we have a lot of good times. We've had so many good conversations. And I'd say one of the things that really helps the conversations is both of us are trained and pride ourselves in the ability to not become dysfunctionally emotional. It's almost like it's a point of pride where we want to say, like, don't worry, I'm not going to feel my way out of this conversation, because sometimes you'll talk about topics and it just becomes too much for people. And not that they'll opt out, they'll just become dysfunctional, irrational and stuff. And if you have like the blue, I always talk about the archetypal, because it's an archetype now, the blue-haired fat lesbian from college. Like, that's one thing. Like, I like to think that me and Two on Tom are on the opposite end of that. It's like these people are losing their minds the minute you disagree with them. Whereas Two on Tom and I have an approach of wanting to really hold ourselves accountable in our own positions. So everything is very rarely a debate when you talk with people like that. Because, and admittedly, like, I've gotten requested to do debates in the past, and I don't really do debates. I've had plenty of arguments with people, but like to do a debate, I'm just, there is a sort of a fundamental opposition to debating, in my approach to becoming, more effective as a man, a leader, etc. I like having conversations. I like having conversations with people I disagree with, but inherent in the framework of a debate is this oppositional identity that each has to possess. The same way a prosecutor and defense attorney, they step into these roles that is by nature oppositional. And to me, I don't want to win an argument with somebody because I could, on one end, potentially not learn anything. On the other end, just make somebody better at countering my arguments without legitimately improving his own. Which even that, I don't even know if it's the worst thing in the world, but hopefully I'm making sense. It makes sense in my head. Right? Aaron said, literally the day of his assassination, Charlie shared, we need an all out war on crime or more innocents will die. Insane. Yeah. And, there's this whole idea of innocent, I think is worth revisiting at some point. Maybe I won't do a deep dive on it now, but we use this term, this concept, uh, colloquially, like casually, and I think when you look at the responsibility that everybody has at default, like as a man with my family, where I'm at, the way that my life is designed, I have certain obligations. I have certain, and one of them is, the defense, the protection of my country. Country. Technically, my country at a certain scale, but more to the point, my family, my tribe. If somebody were to come in and murder me and my family, we could be considered or labeled innocent victims. But the old, I remember doing a talk with two on Tom about this. There's no victims, only volunteers. There's always accountability. And I think, when Charlie Kirk says something, we need an all-out war on crime or more innocents will die, I think it's a very almost representative statement. It's a little naive, but it's allowed to be naive because what it's trying to affect, which is just a general point. Because nothing we do is going to stop people from dying, number one. In all instances, there are decisions made by the people who ultimately die, and they had alternative decisions they could have made. So this idea of innocent, I don't think is very valuable, past intent or culpability. Like this idea of innocent, I don't mean in a legal sense. I just mean we don't want to consider ourselves as being innocent. Somebody walks into a train car that you're on and he's got a knife and starts stabbing people. To sit there and say, when he's walking towards you, I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. I don't deserve this. It's like, okay, good luck with that. And then that's really what I mean. So people are always going to die. Look at the UK. They're fucking stabbing people over there. They're trying to ban knives. So it's like you can't make this shit up. But again, it becomes ridiculous only when we try to control what is on its face unnatural and ridiculous. They don't have firearms in England. Like I'm a big fan of British acting, and there's a lot of TV shows, British TV shows that I watch that I find, very entertaining. And a lot of it is because it's not this lowbrow simpleton shit that they have to feed Americans. But one of the hardest things I have when it comes to endure when watching these British cop shows is that none of them have guns. And you have these writers, right? So I imagine these British writers that are writing these plot lines and they're trying to show bravery and courage and teamwork and loyalty and all these different things in these like law enforcement shows, these detective shows. But some of the stuff they do is just so fucking stupid that it's hard to get, fired up, it would be like, I don't know, somebody's going to challenge somebody to a fight and your friend, convinces them to have a thumb war. and your friend dominates the guy in a thumb war, and everybody's like, "Oh, he won. He's the champion. He's tougher because he." And it's just it's a fucking terrible analogy, I know, but the idea of it is, it's like there's so many predicaments that they write into these cop shows where it's like if any of the cops had a gun, none of this would be happening. And now to them, it's like, oh, you Americans, everything's guns with you. It's like not everything. We have free speech first, and then it's guns, right? But yeah, like to that, the fucking people getting arrested for social media posts. Oh man, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. You see, I have a little bit of a sort of wild animal component to my personality where things like that are concerned. Like I don't know what would happen if police showed up and said, we're arresting you because of this hateful comment that you wrote on Twitter or Facebook. And unbeknownst to you, you have caused great anxiety and stress and trauma to an individual who read it and then contacted us. But like that's what's happening over there. I don't know what I do to those cops when they show up for that. Like of course I would follow the law, right? YouTube, like of course I would follow the law, YouTube. But man, I don't know what it would look like. I don't know what me following a law, like which law I'd be following. Probably natural law would get some priority in that situation. But man, if you guys had fucking guns, you'd be all right. Like if you had some guns, you'd be all right. Oh, what are you gonna do? Jamie writes, if we look at society as a boat and you had people in that boat poking holes in it, all the good people, no matter their offset, would cast those people to the sharks. That's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. Unless you have these people that are so weak, are so fragile, have been declawed to such an extent that they would say, well, the boat can handle a little water. Like they would make some rationalization as to why this was acceptable. And they would use all of their reason, their intellect, and everything, and they would come to a conclusion that has nothing to do with their intelligence. It has all to do with the fact that they're cunts and cowards. That is what's driving their decision making. And again, it's like one of the universals that life runs on: use it or lose it. If you're somebody who has no relationship with violence, you're going to think non-violently, which is fine, so long as everybody else is thinking non-violently. But you know how they say, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king? Well, in an unarmed society, all it takes is one motherfucker with a knife, and you're calling him king. That's the reality of violence, and we could sort of legislate the incentivized mutualism in a country. But to legislate against human nature is a recipe for disaster. And it's usually you stop at tyranny before you get to disaster. What's up, Doug? Doug writes, even true personal emergency, excessive emotion, and panic always detracts from effectiveness. And there are so many different ways to look at it. And you can go by way of scientific data. You can go anecdotally in your own experiences. As somebody who's trained and taught martial arts for over 20 years, it's like one of the things that you'll see somebody suffer from when they first start sparring has nothing to do with their endurance. It has to do with their relationship with uncertainty. Because they don't know what's happening to them fully, because this is uncharted territory, what winds up happening functionally, this is a little insight from my coaching I'm sharing with you guys right now. What is affected primarily is the breathing cycle of the participant. So the person who spars for the first time and is uncertain, his hypervigilance affects his breathing cycle, which has him become fatigued prematurely had he, with that same level of endurance, maintained his breathing cycle. So it's the while exerting force and stuff that builds that fatigue prematurely. When you have individuals that a certain amount of stress starts to affect their body's ability to maintain its equilibrium, everything gets worse. Everything gets worse. People develop tunnel vision. They start changing their priorities. Doing the right thing gets modified to do what makes me feel better. I need to fix this becomes I need to get away from this. And all sorts of bad decisions start to get made when, the individual is in that panic, right? But usually, in my experience, when it comes to practical physical applications of this, it's the breathing cycle that gets sabotaged by a degree of uncertainty. And that's why, even me, and I'm not in great endurance shape right now, I can go for a bit because there's not any position that I haven't built a comfortable relationship with. So it's just going to be my endurance. It's not going to be any anxiety ridden, uncertainty that I'm suffering from, right? Aaron writes, you're correct. It's more just like the old days. He could say that. I guess that's another relative term, though. Innocent according to who? Right on. Or the people on the boat. We must include the fish. Big Willie, what's up, brother, man? Good to see you. Candace, what's going on? CUNT, one of my favorite words of all time. You got to say it. You can't spell it like that, Candace. You got to say it. If you write it all together, I will give you credit for saying it. Doug says panic in bottom position or first grappling. Oh man, that is the one. That's the one. Especially the big guys. You get the big guys, the disproportionately big guys, but they've always been the big guy. You put them on their back, you hold them there, and they feel like they're in a fucking Saw movie. Like their body's about to get fucking split in half or something. It's irrational, in other words, their reaction. And it has to do with that uncertainty affecting their breathing cycle. Not being in shape, you suffer the consequences of not being in shape. But like when you have uncertainty and you're not able to sort of maintain your equilibrium because of your hypervigilance, that's a quick way to sabotage yourself, right? Yes, there it is. Tell Al Jitsu to put a stripe on your belt. Very good. You leveled up. Aaron says, I recently learned the term see you next Tuesday, which is what I'll be calling them from now on, at least in public. As well, you should. Leave the getting in trouble to crazy people like me. Speaking of crazy, last topic. So the other day, I wrote an article on, I think I put it on Tribalnomics.com when I was talking about mental illness and the new form of mental illness. And I cited two already categories of mental illness, one of them being biological. It's the typical, the person develops schizophrenia. The person has some sort of traumatic event and creates a dissociative disorder of some sort or something that's more textbook clinical. That's the biological type. And then the second type is the circumstantial. Circumstantial is the temporary insanity plea sort of scenarios where something happens that is so overwhelming that the person just turns into a version of himself that is completely unrecognizable. It's the third type that I offered as a new, observation in the article, and that is the cultural mental illness. When somebody is culturally crazy, and that's what we're seeing now, this is the blue-haired, fat lesbian from college that's celebrating the Charlie Kirk assassination. It's that pet, talk about pets of society. These people now who are incentivized to act in a way that continues to get them resources in the aquarium or in the culture, to keep terms alike. But if you were to take these people outside of the aquarium / culture and put them in a natural setting, they wouldn't last a day. When I look at what is actual mental illness, I would say it's somebody who has an approach that would not allow them to sustain themselves. They're going to die, in other words, because of this deficiency or dysfunction. that is psychologically driven. That is what I would call mental illness. A lot of what society labels mental illness is really just, and I made this point in the article, I'm not going to be asked at all, it's really mental deviance, right? It is just unlike everybody else. They're not getting along with everybody. They're not following the rules and expectations of society. So let's give them a pill, right? That is not mental illness, according to me. Now, that distinction being made, in society now, we are now creating mentally ill people. And the reason is we don't have consequences early. We allow them we incentivize, we encourage this untethered individualism, and we insulate them and protect them from consequence and allow this dysfunctional identity to really forge itself into something that is no longer malleable. So what do I mean? We basically ruin people to the point where they think society or reality is something that it really isn't. And when, like, you take, for example, the people who are celebrating Charlie Kirk being shot. If you were to take them and actually have them physically witness somebody getting shot like that, I guarantee you they're going to have an issue. The person who is jumping around celebrating and dancing is going to be nowhere to be found. They might be traumatized. They're certainly going to have a relationship or an exposure to reality that you could tell has eluded them their entire lives up until now. Because that's what I see when I look at a lot of those people. It's like, oh man, you guys don't know. You guys don't know. I've seen people shot. I've seen people stabbed. I've been shot at. I've never been stabbed. I've been chased by some dudes with some knives. You know, but I know what reality is. I know what reality looks like. And because I'm aware of that, I'm not so, so irresponsible or so childish even to make these statements like they would. It's like, dude, I don't think you understand what it looks like when somebody gets shot like that. I don't think you get it. I don't think you've had somebody close to you get shot like that. I don't think, so there's just a way to conduct yourself that's really based on an understanding of reality. I'm somebody that wears a lot of shirts that say gratitude on it, right? I made a couple of different gratitude shirts just so I could wear shirts that say gratitude all the time, because that is at the heart of how I approach my life. Like every day I wake up and I make sure I take an inventory of all my assets and opportunities, lest I begin my day with some sort of entitlement or some sort of, disconnected pessimism, like not for me. Why? Because I know what bad looks like. Right? I know what suffering looks like. I know what pain feels like. I know. So I'm not going through all that right now. An attitude of gratitude is how I start it all. Right. So what else is going on? Two on Tom and Al's. I was just talking about you before. Talking about your my favorite, one of my favorite Two on Tom stories outside the abortion clinic, where the lady had a sign saying, they're murdering babies inside, and you said they're murdering babies inside. She said, yeah, and then you said, and you just got a fucking sign, and you just holding a sign. Oh man, I'd give anything to have been there. John Jay, what's up, John Jay? John Jay says, great point to be made about the relationship with violence. I'm no stranger to that relationship, but having visited that friend in some time, you have me thinking I may need to get back in shape. First of all, absolutely, motherfucker. Like you know that. And John Jay grew up with me in the same neighborhood. So John Jay also knows probably some of my my adventures from yesteryear. But I've never made a what's the phrase? I don't know. My brain's starting to leave. Now it's time to get off. I've never made a secret. That was the word that was eluding me. Fucking secret. I never made a secret of my past and my past relationship with violence. And anything that I talk about, it's more than likely, and usually many times over, I'm speaking from an experience of having fucked that up multiple times in my life. And so at some point I was making mistakes, stopped making the mistakes, figured out how I stopped making mistakes, and then got to the point where I could help other guys not make those mistakes. So I certainly don't exempt myself from so many of the criticisms I have and observe in men these days, right? But all right, for a show that I didn't have a concrete framework and just wanted to do some freestyling, we're over an hour. So let's end it there. I appreciate you guys hanging out. If you guys are not getting my emails, masterchimletter.com, sign up. They're free. I send one every morning. I will be here next Wednesday, as always. And I appreciate you guys for hanging out. So I'll see you guys then. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.